We are talking today with Amy Long of Taylor Swift as Books for this pop poetry interview. Amy has been a really awesome supporter of pop poetry and the work that I'm trying to do there. And I'm a huge fan of Taylor Swift as Books, which is sort of a literary phenomenon now. And I'm really excited to talk to you today. Amy, will you tell me a little bit, and I'm sure you've answered this question before, but I wasn't able to find it in my sneaky internet research about you. Could you tell me your origin story, your literary hero origin story? I think we both have kind of a common goal of increasing visibility for literature, and I'm wondering how you got into this space with Taylor Swift.
Do we want to start when you say like literary hero story? Do we want to start like when I was like 11, or do we want to start like when I was 20?
Maybe when you were 20. I mean, how did you end up making this account? What was the spark for that?
It's sort of hard to remember. I know that it was sometime after Folklore came out because I had those pictures. Mm-hmm. And because Folklore is what really like made Taylor kind of like wiped her slate clean and like was her kind of second peak and everyone liked her again. But I had made them for friends who were fans. Like, I guess I had seen someone's book and thought, oh, that looks exactly like this, whatever. And so I'd make them for friends, like happy pub day, and like post it on Twitter or something.
Oh, that's
then
so
I was
nice.
like, wait a minute, this could be an entire Instagram account.
Yeah.
And then everyone could like the books, and Swifties read. Everyone likes, there's no better celebrity than Taylor Swift because you can't not know what she's doing, And so that was just sort of, and then it kind of just like people just like latched onto it and like, kind of blew it up. And we were within like a month or so, we had like 2,000 followers. And then we got deleted.
That's right. You did. Yeah.
And so this is TSAP 2.0.
And it was because they thought you were trying to be her. Is that right?
Yeah, they thought I was trying to invert. Every now and then they go around and do what I call the Swiftie sweep, where like it's like one of the reasons that our profile picture is no longer Taylor coming out of McNally Jackson is because a Taylor profile picture is like the easiest way to get caught up in a Swiftie sweep. But like people, every now and then I'll just see like a huge follower decrease, but like, or like I'll lose people I'm following or something, and I'm like, oh, because it's just like go away. And apparently it happens all the time, and they're just constantly making new accounts.
Yeah, I mean, what you're trying to do is like the furthest thing from impersonation. It's more like it's really just.
I mean, any human who looked at the account would be like, oh, yeah, I don't think anyone thinks Taylor Swift spends the day matching her pictures of herself to books.
Has Taylor Swift ever had any interaction with your account of any kind?
Well, we are, I'm like, internet buddies with someone who is on her team.
Cool.
But
that's
not like on her team, like sitting around at the Miss Americana meeting, you know what I'm talking about, where they're talking about lover and not like that close team. But there's a chance she's seen it. I like to imagine that Joe checks for eating disorder triggers, and then because I do, because I think about this. Yes, thank you, Bevo. I try not to use pictures where she looks like scarily thin, or even where she looks what she would think is fat. Like she's, that scene in Miss Americana where she's in the car and she's like, if someone says that I looked fat or maybe pregnant,
it's a career issue for her. Yeah.
Eating. Yeah. And she was, I remember seeing the picture that, she points at and like what she was wearing that day. I remember when, seeing that at some point when there was a point during the Reputation era when she would leave her house like every day, all like, dressed up, almost 1989 style. But I won't make a joke if it's like laughing at her and she couldn't laugh with it. Like if someone wants to do it like my edgy book next to Taylor Swift, I'm like, nope. We're earnest here.
I think that's so nice. I mean, that's one of the things I like about your account is that it is, I mean, it's kind. There's not always a lot of space for that on the internet, that it is earnest.
There's all that stuff, sort of like literary Twitter and like all that, where sort of like the point is like a burn, like it's just like a little bit mean or like a little bit like, like snarky or whatever. And I just didn't want to do that. And I mean, in part, I think, like one of the goals is we have way too many places where writers talk to each other about their books. Like we don't need another one. And like the whole point of this is that it makes it easier to get to regular people. And we do get to regular people, which is, impressive.
Yeah. That's hard. You're putting eyeballs on books, and that's hard to do in a non-literary context with kind of folks who are already reading, already, supporting their writer friends. Like you said, you're looking for folks who are outside of that space. I think that's great work. That's something I'm interested in. I think that we love to sit around and bemoan the state of things, but the only way that things change is if we expand our audience, and we expand who gets to be a part of poetry or a part of fiction or a part of nonfiction communities. So I think that's really cool that Taylor Swift is this draw for people. Why do you think, maybe this is obvious, but what makes pop culture a good vehicle for this, do you think? Because I also really like, have you ever looked at Dana Patterson's Instagram account, Poetry Plus Fungus?
Yeah. She beautiful.
It's like totally beautiful art object. I think there's something, really magnetic about using pop culture to pair with a book cover. What is that thing for you?
Well, for me, like I have a connection to Taylor from, her art and all that. And obviously I always say that, we love Taylor because we have a lot of feelings. And who are these books for, if not people with a lot of feelings?
Yeah.
So it works out. Like, I feel like if Swifties read the books, they would like them, and but I think that nobody, there's a degree to which like some people kind of try to do like more like intellectual kind of, or like something where that you have to read or like, listen to or whatever. And I think because even people who hate Taylor love PSAP. I can't remember who it was, but someone, when I swifted their book, was like, oh my God, I hate Taylor Swift, but I love this.
I think part of what originally drew me to the account is that I was just interested in the kind of like virtuosity of your matching, like how interesting it was and how good it was, how much like the covers the Taylors were, and just thinking about how can there be this many Taylor photos? What kind of encyclopedic knowledge must you have of Taylor Swift?
So crazy. It's like at this point, most of the time I look at the book and I go, that outfit from 2011.
Wow. That's deep knowledge. That's really deep knowledge.
I think like it used to take me a lot longer to make each one. But the more that I scrolled through the pictures, the better I knew them. So now often I'll spend more time Googling for the picture that I want. Because I saved it somewhere in my like 9 folders of Taylor pictures, but I'm not gonna. I'm sort of working on organizing them by era. And then after that, I cross-reference with colors. Like I don't know how to, that sounds maybe a little too much. I'm not that neat, but I think that pop culture works well because it's a quick thing. Everybody knows what it means. Like it's like it's visually like it can stop you in your tracks and make you go like, what is that? And so you have to look at both things, but like ideally the cover should be, because I try to pick as much as I can on cover alone. Obviously, sometimes it's like a friend or someone who is a really loyalty sabber has a book come out. Obviously, I'm going to do the book no matter what the cover looks like, but ideally you pick on cover alone. So the cover is arresting, and then you're like, what's Taylor Swift doing next to it? And then, then you sort of get an idea and you follow. And my favorites are I love all my children equally, but I really love doing Joe matches, just because it's like,
I've seen,
like you're like really in the, the Taylor
Swift. We're
Swift
deep into the world.
Mm-hmm. I figure he's earned his spot, 6-7 years that. Yeah.
I mean, one of my questions for you was, how much of an actual Swiftie are you? And I think the answer is you're in deep.
A big one.
You're a big one.
It's kind of weird because I didn't get into her until I was like 27 or so. And it was when Red came out. So I guess I was 28, something like that. And I mean, like, I knew who she was. I was like, when the Kanye thing happened, I was like Team Taylor, obviously. And like, I knew the hits and I thought she was cute, Yeah. But then I was, I take opioids for a pain problem. And that year I got off of them entirely. So that we could see if they were exacerbating the pain or causing it, or like just kind of start with a clean slate. It didn't make any difference at all.
Wow, that's
but like it was like, you get, when you're doing that, like, you're more depressed, like your brain is relearning how to make all these chemicals and do these like processes that the pills were doing for it, sort of the way people quit smoking weed, they can't sleep because weed activates a brain chemical that has something to do with sleep. So your brain quits making it because it's like, well, they're going to give it to me, but so I was either really sad and listening to a lot of Jason Molina, or I wanted to be happy, and then I put on Red. And then, but you can also be sad to Red. Like it's, but it was, I mean, until Folklore and Evermore, it was my favorite. Like I would have said, maybe career best. And it's almost too hard to say, like, I can't rank the albums. They're too different,
I'm sure you love all your children equally.
Did you see
Taylor's children equally? I mean, you mentioned I was just going to say that you mentioned Folklore, and that's actually I was really late to the game. I'm not very well versed in her stuff, but I only sort of switched on to her at all with Folklore when I covered it for Pop Poetry, because she has that bit about the lake poets in that
was
album.
Perfect for you.
Yeah, and so then I
knew you'd been doing Pop Poetry that long.
Yeah, I started doing it in 2020. It's been weekly since 21. Yeah. But that post, I started to dig into more Taylor Swift fans, and there seems to be a lot of discussion about how poetic her writing is, and there's a lot of discussion of it as poetry, or that she shares something with poets. Do you agree with those kinds of discussions that people have about her work?
I mean, I think that there is probably no work that you couldn't do literary analysis on and, come up with. But I mean, I know that she writes poems like as poems. I don't know how good she is as she includes poems in the Reputation magazines that.
Okay, so this is
like special edition Reputations.
Very cool.
They got at Target, and they came with these like fake like magazines. It's like, who is Meredith's real father? Like those kinds of headlines, and there were poems in them. And I remember reading a thing with a professor who taught poetry, some MFA program somewhere, analyzing like, are these good poems? And the professor said, no, I mean, not really, like there's not enough element of like surprising language and, that kind of thing, that they would probably work better as song lyrics. But I've heard her say this started out as a poem I was writing, and then,
That's cool.
but I mean, certainly I think that, I mean, I don't know what she's doing that, I mean, I don't know what poets are doing that she's not doing, I mean, there is, especially when you consider music as language, like there's a lot, there are a lot of surprises, like, especially if you think about like Midnights. Have you listened to Midnights?
Yeah.
Like, Question is one of my favorites because it has those like, it has like a really weird kind of melody, and then it'll go like the half moon, like that kind of like, and it's, a lot of people don't like it because of the like, it kind of like the, I guess that's what's suitable, that kind of like weird, but like that's what I love about it, because I mean that's sort of one of the things that poetry does, is like surprises you with its language. And so like, song structure is a lot like poetic structure, and
definitely
you have those constraints, like I mean that's one of the things that I like about formal poetry, is like, and one of the things I like about CNF, which is what I mostly write, like with like a hermit crab essay or something, or like a sestina, let's say, you've got to get from here to here using these rules, like, and so it's, the constraints can be sort of generative because they have to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, songwriters, they have tons of constraints, if I want my poem to ramble on to book length, I can, but you're not going to be able to put a 20-minute song on the radio. You're just not. I mean, there's lots
apparently
of different
now you can put a 10-minute song on the radio, but
thanks
only
to her. Yeah, thanks. But I think there is something poetic about her lyrics, and I find that sometimes she has, so I'm sure there's a term for it, I need to look it up, but I think that she has like a higher number of like unusual words, like her vocabulary is a little I like, she'll use some word and I'm like, really, in the song, okay, great, like I'm into it. Just nothing too bizarre, but just something where I'm like, that, when's the last time I heard someone put this word in a song? I think she has not density of vocabulary, but the sort of breadth of her vocabulary, I think is quite large, which is one thing that I really respond to too. And I think, we're in the age of wondering about the poeticism of lyricists, because Bob Dylan won this enormous prize for poetry, and that sort of opened the floodgates of poets going, oh my God, no, we have to have this.
Now I'm in competition with people who are already famous.
Wonderful.
I didn't really like that decision. I felt like it was, I mean, there's like a prize for literature. We don't have that many huge prizes for literature.
I know, let us have it. Let us have our things.
Yeah, you're going to give it to a guy who doesn't even fucking want it. Like,
and he didn't show up to collect it, especially for poetry. And it's just, it is a thing. And it reminds me of another question I wanted to ask you about, book, like online book culture, bookstagram culture, book talk, all of these things in those areas, which I spend a little time there. I don't spend a ton of time.
Yeah, same.
But when I'm there, I see a lot of fiction. Fiction seems to be extraordinarily overrepresented in those spaces. I'm sure as a creative nonfiction writer, you see that too. And one of the things that drew me to TSAB was that there were books of poetry just getting all these likes and being highly visible. And I was totally wowed by that. How have you seen the account like boost and benefit poets in particular? What do you think is useful for poets that your account is doing?
Well, poets were they were kind of the first to really latch onto it, in part, I think, because they're always looking for ways, I don't want to make them sound like, crass.
Oh, but I mean, you're not wrong.
But I mean, it's really hard to get coverage for poetry. Everyone says people don't read poetry. And if you keep saying people don't read poetry, then they're not going to read poetry,
Yeah.
So it's just sort of like, I mean, because they were sending in requests, and they also have really great covers. I love doing cover design talks because cover designers get even less attention than poets.
True. That's so true. That is one thing that you do that's so unique. You make sure they're getting their due.
Well, and if people like watching them because they never get to hear it, you know, like for a lot of writers, the cover design process is really opaque, especially for like big presses, like mid-list kind of, you know, like a lot of times they won't tell you who your cover designer is.
Right.
I think it's so that like you can give honest feedback and everyone can, you know, without souring everyone on each other, you know.
Yeah.
Like if I say something about the cover and the cover designer's like, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think but there's this thing that happens a lot with, and this has been a challenge for me actually, is with especially women of colors books, where Olivia Hammerman is the cover designer who calls it the blob. You know, that thing where you get like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't have to describe it because you've seen it. Like
amorphous colors smooshing together blob with like a blocky font.
Yeah.
White blocky font. Yeah.
Yep. It's like, and I feel like it's like the cover designer thinks like, okay, I don't know what to do. Okay. Black, or like this could also go for Latino, whatever. Like, okay, jungle, all the colors. And it's really hard
stop
to
thinking.
do those.
Yeah.
There are only so many outfits with all the colors in them, you know?
Yeah. And are you disinclined to Swift the blob, or you just jump into the challenge?
For the most part, the blob happens on books that are bigger than I would. I try to stay abreast as much as I can.
Right.
But every now and then you do want to throw in a book that people know, you know, just to, because I always wonder like why people leave. And one of my my guesses is that they're like, I don't know any of these books, but I've seen.
Isn't that the point, you know, in some
yes,
way that I don't know a lot of these books either. And I'm like, add to Amazon cart or add to reading list.
Yeah, I mean,
follow the author on Instagram.
Yeah, it's my like to be read like stack.
I'm sure your stack is pretty nuts.
It's like out of control. And then people send me books and I'm like, oh gosh, I will get to this. I promise, I really appreciate it. But I've got 30 other free books.
I bet you do. I bet you were just buried.
A terrible thing.
Oh yeah, it's a terrible, terrible burden. Big stack of unread books that we all love so much.
Well, I mean, one of the most exciting things is like you're anticipating reading the book, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you I know you mostly write creative nonfiction. What is your relationship to poetry like outside of Taylor Swift as books? Do you read a lot of poetry as a function of that? What's your sort of background?
I have been reading more poetry just because I've been finding out about more poetry and stuff.
Cool.
And I like it because it goes quickly. Like, I know that you're supposed to spend time with the poems and stuff, but you know, I mean, it doesn't take all that long to read a book of poetry and then you can come back to it and, you know,
right.
But it's a good sort of like palate cleanser between things. If you're just sort of not sure what you want to read, you know, you're like you just finished something and you're like, oh, I don't know yet. Then, you know, pick up a book of poetry and, you know.
Diving into a novel is a big commitment.
Yeah. And I never really, I know I wrote poems when I was a child. I'm sure they were terrible, though one of them did make my mom cry.
That's the point, right? Is to make your mom cry with your first poems or all of your poems.
I wrote it after her dad died. And I remember I think I was like 7 or 8 or something. It's weird that I have this like very vivid memory of like the piece of paper and everything. But I kind of decided like I wasn't a good poet. And the only time I really engaged with poetry was when I had to in my MFA, when we had to take form and theory of poetry so we could teach it. And the only way that I really know how to teach poetry is to teach forms. because they have rules, and I can't tell you what, when in saying like, I like this poem, or I don't know, like if I were to, I mean, I never grade creative work. I don't, everybody gets an A. They did it. They tried,
Hard. It is a
but
whole thing, as they say. Creative
I mean,
writing
I know
assessment.
that I definitely got at least a B on a poem or something. And I'm like, come on, in this graduate class, like
I
I'm
do
not
not
a
envy.
poet.
Yeah.
I just expect everyone to suddenly be poets. But I mean, I do every now and then I try to, like, I'll be like, I think I'm gonna try to write some form or whatever. And a friend and I started writing songs during the pandemic.
I was going to
Like,
ask if you ever wrote songs, if you've spent a lot of time with Taylor Swift.
I taught myself to play guitar by learning one of her songs every day, because
That's
they're
amazing.
relatively easy, especially if you have a capo.
Okay.
And so like it was really just like, and now I can play guitar, like not well, but like well enough to like play around a campfire or something, and that's all
cool.
I really want,
Great.
and well enough to come up with, every now and then I'll get little parts that I wrote get caught in my head, and I'm like, oh, it's so catchy. What could I do with the rest of it?
This is how Taylor Swift was born. She interests me because fans really love her. They have this really deep devotion to her. They respect her and they praise her poetic lyrics. And they also it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a kind of admiration of her as just a normal chick. Like, I'm the problem. It's me. I'm the problem. That kind of cute, like, I'm a mess,
Mm-hmm.
But also, on the other hand, her concert tickets for the Eras tour are going for $3,000. She's like the most famous person in the world. So do you care to weigh in on how she manages to have it both ways like this? Because, talk about, there's something to me about the kind of, I'm interested, as you know, in like the high and low culture fusion. I feel like she's doing something similar with her kind of level of fame. She's talking to people on their level, but she's also incredibly rich and famous and aloof and untouchable in this way. And how do people still like her that much and she's this famous?
There is a contingent, and because the idea of parasocial relationships kind of moved into the like general consciousness. Mm-hmm. People have a lot of like Tumblr Swifties, and some like Twitter ones, less so, I think, on Instagram. It's like, we'll be like, we don't know her. We don't, like, and it's like they're the new sort of like, oh, she would never do that. Like that kind of like there are a lot of people on this tour who are like, the vigilante shit camera person is sexualizing her. It's like, no, that's a chair dance. Like, she's doing burlesque. She is perfectly fine with you looking at her sexually. But
that's like hard for them to wrap their head around.
I think, she's a perpetual teenager and she needs us to protect her. And she's never, she's never had sex, and she doesn't drink, and surely she's never done drugs. I'm sure she's done drugs.
It'll be interesting to see how her career continues to develop when when she finally ever hits the point at which she's clearly not a teenager. She's still not there. But
I know. I mean, it's
one
so
day,
weird.
I don't know.
Like when she did her like political post and all that, legislators, I think it was Mike Huckabee, said, well, it doesn't matter because 13-year-old girls don't vote. Like, people really do think that our target demographic is 13-year-olds, and you're like, are you listening?
I mean, to say nothing of the, cultural phenomenon of everything that young girls like is trash.
Is hated. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And of course, 13-year-olds don't ever age into 18-year-olds.
Right.
Who do vote.
That's my like sort of grand unified theory of why we hate Taylor Swift for sport. We just don't, we hate teenage girls because culturally we are men and we can't fuck them. Yeah. We want to fuck them, but we can't. And we know we can't, so we hate them. And then we hate everything they like, and
I totally, I'm I'm with you. And I mean, do you feel that the work that you're doing in any way is kind of countering that by pairing her with what we could maybe consider serious books? Do you think you're complicating that by doing that?
I think that there is like a space in the conversation that kind of opens up when you do it that way. And I sort of, sometimes I get this idea from people like that the idea is funny because Taylor Swift doesn't read books. And I'm like, no, she totally reads books. She talks about books kind of a lot. Like, there was a picture from her 32nd birthday. Somebody like changed the colors so you could read the book, the book spines on her shelves, and it was Balzac. And I'm like, whoa, what, that's,
yeah.
But I mean, I think that I almost don't want to say like, yes, I am elevating her out of that tawdry pop culture space where the teenage girls hang out and making her a serious object.
Yeah, no.
Like I don't want to, but I mean, I think that there are people who have sort of reevaluated what they think of her in large part based on folklore. Because
I think, and I think she too is in turn is complicating how tawdry we consider pop culture to be. I think she's having the opposite effect on it, where she's saying it matters, guys.
Yeah.
What we're doing here is culture too.
No question. She believes that it matters. Like that's one of her biggest things is like, musicians being compensated, credited, all that. It's one of the reasons why I like to make sure that, aside from that, the cover designer's work is what's actually being matched. Like if I didn't credit the cover designer, I would sort of be going against the Swiftian ethos of,
I love that. And it's not Jonathan Swift you're talking about.
No,
you're talking about that. I love that. That's awesome.
And now they have the classes at NYU and UT Austin.
Wow.
The professor from the UT Austin class follows TSAB and had
really
she had the whole,
I love that.
Like she put sort of like the prompts for the day on Instagram so you could kind of follow along with the class. She's thinking about doing a summer one. If we could all sign up and have it be like a fun.
That's so cool.
Buddies thing.
That's amazing. That's great for everybody involved when, you can get folks like that thinking about the pedagogical possibilities. That's really, really cool. I want to make sure I ask you one of my favorite questions, a question I ask everybody I interview for Pop Poetry, which is whether you might have a favorite poem or poet that appears somewhere else in popular culture, like on TV or in a film or a song, or like a poet character that exists somewhere. Have I covered it at Pop Poetry, or is this something that you've not seen there? Do you have anything that comes to mind where it delights you when you see this piece of poetry or a poet in pop culture?
I feel like I did have a poet character and I would have been able to think about it until you said it, and then it just like totally left my mind.
That's okay.
But I think that my favorite poem has always been Sonia Huber's Dear Thrasher.
Okay.
She wrote using a letter that I think a 13-year-old girl, sent to Thrasher, the skateboard magazine. And it's like, about like sort of the letter is sort of like, could you quit putting these like sexy women in the ads or whatever, because it makes the boy skaters think that we aren't, that girls can't skate and aren't real people, and girls are getting raped in the porta potty. And
wow,
like
I've not read this poem. I want to get into it. Yeah,
it's online. You can if you Google Sonia Huber Dear Thrasher, I'm sure, or I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that's definitely, there's something to that about, it's like a skateboarding magazine. I'm starting to expand my understanding of what popular culture encompasses, and that's definitely something, certain kinds of magazines that are just much more visible I mean, just about everything is more visible than poetry as a form of culture, really, in some ways. I mean, I've been starting to think about how often, poetry is on Jeopardy. Jeopardy is, I guess, like an
The
intellectual
last
type
bastion of,
thing, but it's also a TV show with so many eyeballs on it every week. Is this an access point in any way for people? I mean, what kinds of what kind? But it's exclusively, canon poets, and if this
so we're not
word
gonna have,
appears
like,
in the question, yeah.
art.
So it's not a space
Poetoria.
for, no, it's not really a space for living poets, sadly. But yeah, I'm looking forward to looking up that poem. That sounds really cool.
I love it.
It's a hard world to make art in. It really is. And
It is. I mean, it's like it's organized against us ever making art, because you've got to work, and that's like your whole day. And then, you've got your entertainment and your, all.
Yeah. Because I'm not sure, but I don't think TSAB is your day job, is it? Is it?
No, fortunately.
Yeah.
I
You're like me.
I think about asking someone to sponsor me. Like I feel like CLNP or something should do it.
That would be awesome.
That'd be great. It would be smart too. I mean,
it's so hard to, but the
it's
same
hard
thing with
to
my
make a
Mind to
case.
Passion project. It fits in this. I now I have a baby, and someone asked me the other day, how are you doing all of this? And I honestly don't have an answer. I don't really know how I'm not sure how I'm doing it all. I'm just doing it. Like, what's happening? Still writing this weekly. And you post, how many Taylors do you do in a week?
Usually it's just 4 or 5. Like,
just 4 or 5. I'm struggling to get my weekly, sometimes twice a week posts. Just 4 or 5. I mean that's incredible, really.
It now that I'm way faster at making them now. I've got 300 in drafts. Like,
really,
all those out. Like, it's, and then
so if you get into the queue now, you're not coming out for months, right?
Oh no, it's not a linear line.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, if I really like your Taylor or you or whatever, I'll put it up before some other, it's, there are some
the holistic process.
Yeah. It's, yes, it's like college admissions. It's not the only thing we consider. We consider a lot of different angles.
It feels as exciting as, getting your letter. Like, oh, my Taylor's up today. I can't wait. I can't wait. I mean, my whole reason I'm excited to get my cover done is that I want to send it to you.
I can't wait to Swift you.
And it's an interesting story of how it's coming together too. So I'll have to talk to you about that at some point. But tell me,
I love cover design stories.
Tell me about what, if anything, do you know is next for this account? Do you have other ambitions to do different kinds of projects? Are you trying to expand or deepen this one? Do you envision setting it aside? Do you have any concept of that?
I do sometimes think about setting it aside, doing maybe like 3 a week, because then it wouldn't take up so much brain space, and I like posting them at midnight because I don't have to worry about it. And, I just go to sleep, I wake up, it's wherever it is. I'm working on getting to a point where I don't like obsess over how they're doing, because no matter what, they just got in front of about at least 1,000 people. Like, that's pretty much the bottom of our reach. I mostly only count follower reach, because I've basically quit trying to reach non-followers, because they see the post, they don't like it, they were never going to like it anyway. It's not what they were looking for,
Right.
And so they then there are 400 or 1,000 of them who've seen the post via hashtags, and then they're a drag on the algorithm and it doesn't get to followers. So I've been focusing on to more follow, because the followers signed up to see books, so they're more even if they don't like the post, just seeing it is they signed up to see that. But I mean, I would love to be able to do something like a conference, or just something where we could all get together and,
that'd be awesome. Like a TSAB party or a reunion. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Hey, you're not in Nashville, are you?
No, I am in West Michigan.
Oh, okay. Because that's where I'm seeing Taylor, and there are some other TSABers there, and so we were gonna
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, that seems like the Taylor Swift concert, it's like the most amazing place to have a TSAB reunion. In your
Mhm.
way, you're making a little fandom for poets and writers who can only
Hopefully.
dream of such things. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for talking with me today about all this great stuff. I'm looking forward to more Taylors and looking forward to hopefully seeing my book, if I'm lucky, on TSAB.
Your book's going to be on TSAB.
Thank you for being such a friend of pop poetry, and I'm sure we're going to
Sure.
talk again.